Hello, book chums. Today I'm going to be talking about Brave New World, which has apparently been developed into a major new TV series. So this is by Aldous Huxley. It's a classic of sorts and it's worth a read. It's not a difficult read. It sounds like it's difficult, but it really isn't. It's about 200 odd pages, 225 pages or slightly more than that. So, is it any good? Yes, it is. So therefore, you should read it. No, you might not want to read it. A lot of people talk about it as a dystopia, but I think from the perspective that Aldous is coming from, it's more like a utopia. It's just the way they get about it being a utopia is dystopian, if that makes sense. But the overall result may be a utopia. But it's kind of questions two different kind of perspectives on what the perfect world is, and the answer might be, well, it seems to be that it's neither, somewhere in between, a little bit of everything, or perhaps the answer is that there is no perfect world, there is no utopia, there is no dystopia, therefore, so there's just utopia. All these books about utopias and dystopias, and they're all irrelevant, maybe. So what's it about? It's about a future after, I think it was a 9-year war or something, that meant that the world powers all joined together, and they essentially have a world system where they have selected their population to do specific jobs so that nobody is unhappy. You don't have any kind of any kind of rich people, I suppose, oligarchs, kings, etc. And you, in theory, don't have poor people / slaves, although there is a slavery in it, but the idea is that the slaves are happy, because the way they go about that is they have this, they no longer have pregnancy either, because all the reproduction is done in little tanks, little jars that are on a conveyor belt, and with little humans in them. And it's all about making lots of twins, well, quadruplets, whatever 12 ruplets is, and things like that. So that's your method of reproduction, identical people, but identical, they're also in a class as well, so it's like a caste system. And the way it works, you have this massive conveyor belt, massive warehouse with bottled humans developing, as in, and it's an artificial womb really, and what they do, they insert alcohol into the fluids to retard them, and they also cut off the amount of oxygen, so maybe they'll put 70% of oxygen in certain jars to make them less capable, because they talk about alpha, beta, delta, gamma, and he uses the term semi-moron as well, because you have the lower class as being the ones that are the toilet cleaners, I suppose, that do the basic jobs and are barely literate, and then you have the alphas, and they have alpha minus, alpha plus, so there's even a degree of alpha, and the top alpha is the world controller. Those are like the kings, I suppose, but you have a number of world controllers looking after the world and deciding the politics of what's allowed and what's not allowed in the society, because it's a very totalitarian society. It's very restrictive. You can't have, there's no longer Shakespeare, and most of literature, or all of literature, has been done away with. The Bible, religion's gone as well, but the religion is the society, and the way they balance it is that they say people are in classes. So because you've got a caste system, people who are working in the lower end jobs are happy because that's the level of their intelligence. They're doing a job that they can enjoy, whereas the top level jobs, it's all the intelligent people doing that, so they're fulfilled as well. And the middle people, because jobs are all done according to the apparent capability of the individual, and it's not perfect, the system, because there are certain failures. There's also another thing is as well, it's about height, so the shorter people will be at the lower class, the taller people will be the upper classes. So there's physiological differences between people, although he doesn't mention it about whether there's an attractiveness difference between them. I really don't know, but a lot of the people in the story are quite young, and the people who are old are probably in their 40s, or they look like they're in their 40s anyway, because aging's been restricted and slowed down. So with this happy world, you kind of wonder, why is there a story? Because everything's hunky-dory and happy. Well, you have like a character called Bernard, and he's really unhappy. He's kind of a frustrating, annoying character, to be quite honest. And he's like on the outside. He's an outsider, and I think this book is not just about the society. It's about the outsiders in society. He's an outsider because he doesn't. He basically. I mean, another element of society is that there's contraception, because the people who are fertile, there's not many of them. Most people are infertile in the society, but there's free love basically, and that keeps them happy by being allowed to have sex with anybody. But the society says that you must only have sex with multiple people, not just one person, because you can't form a bond or relationship with one person like a marriage, for example. That doesn't happen anymore. It's free love. And what Bernard doesn't like is that it's free love, and he obsesses about this girl, this lady, Lenina. Lenina, I think that's how you pronounce it. And she's probably the one on the front. That's probably that one. That's probably Bernard, I assume. But he doesn't look like him at all, what I'd imagine him to look like. Even though I've read this with him on the cover, I don't think that's what Bernard looks like. If that is what he looks like, I've not seen the series. And basically he's one of the unfulfilled outsiders who doesn't have sex, doesn't have any relationships. I'm not sure if he has. I think he has had relationships, but they're not fruitful because, well, people are generally unwilling because he's shorter than average. They call him a midget, but maybe he's only 5'10" rather than 6'4". Therefore he's kind of shunned by society. He has a friend who similarly has a similar approach to him, but the friend is very popular with the ladies, but he's got sick of it all and he wants to pursue his own kind of thing and be alone. I think the problem is the way that society sees people like Bernard as being alone by themselves, and spending time by yourself is wrong. You need to fill your time with as much as possible, like people. You need to socialise. You need to play magnetic golf. That's it, the sports. Because basically it's keeping people distracted from thinking about how crap things are or how good things are, to stop them from getting sad. You have these sports that Huxley's invented, like magnetic golf and normal golf, and it's a lot of golf stuff. There's also a bumble pussy or something, bumble puppy. Centrifugal bumble puppy. It's a tower that rotating balls, and balls get spit out. Loads of kids around, about 20, they've got to catch the ball. I don't know the purpose of it. He kind of explains it a little bit, but it seems a bit ridiculous. Also, everyone flies around in helicopters in the future, and jet planes. And the other thing is as well, jet planes, they have people, they have some children in their tanks who are inverted every now and then, so they get used to being upside down, and they favour being upside down. Because they'll feed them some dopamine or something, I don't know, when they're upside down, and that'll make them happy when they're upside down. And then they'll put them on these rocket planes, and they're engineers on rocket planes, because what they're going to do is get outside while the rocket's in motion and fix the engines, which is crazy. That would never happen, but maybe it would in the future. But coming back to Bernard, he's an outsider. But Lenina, here she is. She's a pretty lady. He's a handsome. They're all handsome people, aren't they? But she is described as being pneumatic. I don't know if that's a sexual thing, I think. And they talk about from the perspective of being a desirable sexual partner. A lot of the men go, "Oh, Lenina," and they rub the thighs. And she's obsessed with this one guy, I can't remember his name, but he's kind of the jock, as it was, the popular chap who's like the knobhead, and Bernard is the geek. And what happens is, her and Bernard end up together because he goes to a savage colony which is in New Mexico, where you have Indians, he describes them, so I think he's talking about Native Americans, but there they meet somebody called the Savage, who's basically, he's from their society, but his mother ended up there pregnant by accident, and the Savage gets brought back basically. And this is the contrast between the two worlds. Now the Savage, because he was white compared to the darker skinned Native Americans, I'll call them rather than using Huxley's word, and he was an outcast there and people didn't like him. But he comes to the new world, which should have been his home in the past, but he wouldn't have existed, I suppose. But if he did exist genetically, then that's where it would be. He's an outcast there as well. So he's always an outcast, and Bernard is still an outcast, although Bernard is the one that brings him back. And he gets obsessed, this native, this savage guy gets obsessed with Lenina, and he has thoughts about her and all that. And meanwhile, Bernard goes the other way. So he goes from having, he has sex with her, which it seems meaningless or something, and then he goes through to being popular because he brings back this savage, and everyone wants to get to know Bernard, but not really. They want to get to know the savage. So he ends up being sexually successful, and then he starts boasting about that. And he's a really annoying character. It's like you have these two events, these events kind of occur, and it's kind of outlining how both worlds are imperfect, and maybe that there is no perfect world. But if you look at the Brave New World, which is, and that's the savage who calls it the Brave New World, then it does overall work, and there is overall stability and no wars. So from that perspective, is it a good thing? Maybe it is. I really don't know. And I don't think the answer's in the book, and I know Huxley talks about it, and he talks about things he would have changed. Like, he says the things he would have changed would have been nuclear power, because he doesn't describe that. Even though he says he knew about it, and this was written in 1931, I reckon he didn't know about it, but he's pretending he did. He's pretending he wrote about it, which he probably didn't. But I don't know, correct me in the comments if that's true. But that was the main thing he thought, that was a problem with the book. But I think the problem with the book is I suppose it's the depth of the characters. They're all about they don't have enough. I suppose they don't have enough depth to them, because the savage is he has this attraction to Lenina, but for some reason he can't act on it, and he has this view of sex before marriage kind of thing. You need to have sex after marriage, that's it. Like the view you have because it's reflecting the views in the 1930s, I suppose, with the prudism and all that business. Although in the 1930s that was all over the place. It depends on where you were. If you went to a little town in Germany, there was all sorts of free love going on there in the 1930s. 1931, 32 is when it was published. So it's an easy read. It's not one that you might want to read again, and I think the characterization is where it falls down. I think the concept and the whole thought process about this Brave New World and how society works is very good, and the Savage's world is good as well, because it with its pagan rituals and all that kind of business going on. So that's good. But the characters themselves you might find are frustrated and unrealistic, and maybe the TV series is better in this case than the book. But I'm not saying it is, because I'm not seeing it because I've got to pay for it. I'm not paying for it. I've got a few subscription services not available on them. I'll wait until it is. And if it's not, then it's not. I've read the book. I'm not that bothered. But the book is worth reading. But would I read it again? No, I'd say it's a 3.5 out of 5 experience. But considering it was written in the 1930s, it's very good, and it was very thoughtful and thought-provoking. I think that's the main thing you'll get out of this book, that'll make you think about what society is and how it operates, by taking these two kind of extreme angles and contrasting them. And they're neither entirely realistic, as I said. It could all go. There's elements of each in society, and there's elements in the characters. I like the characters' behaviours, just not the way that there wasn't a consistency that followed through across some of them, like the Savage and Bernard in particular, and the ending as well with the Savage is a bit weak. I'd say it's very weak, and I think Huxley also mentions that as well, that it is a bit weak at the end, and he would change it. So would I. I agree with Huxley. If you read this one, it's got a foreword by Huxley. Don't read any of that, because there's spoilers in it as ever. So I read that at the end, and there's a foreword by some dude who just repeats what Huxley says basically. So I don't know why he bothered, really. David Bradshaw, don't bother. Why not? Why don't you just write your own story? Although he adds his own little bits, which are quite useful, makes it more in English, rather than Huxley using big words and pretending he's intelligent, which he is an intelligent guy, but you don't need to use big words, Aldous, if you're listening from the grave, of course. Right, so that's the book. Worth a read, recommended classic reads, but I'd certainly read other books before I read this as a classic. But it is an easy read, so for that reason it's a yes. Thank you very much for watching, and have a most excellent day.